The Mario series has always held, and always will hold, a very special place in my heart. Mario is the one who made me fall in love with video games, from the very moment I first picked up a DS when I was 6. I have poured hundreds, no, probably thousands, yeah, definitely thousands, of hours into games from all corners of the franchise. As a kid, I spent an absurd amount of my free time just scouring the Mario Wiki, because I wanted to know every last detail about every character and every game in the series, even the ones I never played. When I entered middle school and all of my friends entered their Nintendo is for babies phase, I remained fiercely loyal to that chubby little plumber. No amount of peer pressure was going to convince me to put down his games. I owe so much of my identity as a fan of not just video games, but pop culture as a whole to Mario. He opened up the door for me to discover other series, Nintendo and beyond. All of the time I've spent reading, writing, discussing, obsessing over my nerdy passions with fellow nerds, whether it be gaming, film, television, all of that could be traced back to a spark that was lit by Mario. So with all that said, I'm sure it wouldn't come as a surprise if I told you that I spent pretty much my entire childhood dreaming of what a Mario movie could look like. And I know, there's already been a Mario movie. And look, the live-action Super Mario Bros. Certainly has its charm, but I don't think many people are going to argue in earnest that it was actually a well-made film.
What the fuck is that?
And certainly not a good or faithful adaptation of the source material.
It's incredible!
Not to mention that this movie came out in 1993, a time when the franchise was largely still in its infancy. Since then, the world of Mario has expanded dramatically, with so many more characters and set pieces to work with in a potential new movie, a proper, modern, animated one that would bring the world of Mario, as we know it today, to life. And about 5 years ago, it looked like I was about to finally get my wish. Rumors began circulating towards the end of 2017 about a brand new animated Mario movie being in the works. And that following January, Nintendo confirmed those rumors. Now, the first instinct for fans like myself was to be elated by this news. After all this time, it was finally happening. Mario was actually getting an honest-to-God animated movie produced by a big-name studio. However, that excitement came attached with one big fat asterisk. The studio in question was Illumination. Yep, it's time to talk about Illumination now.
That's a woman?
So, I honestly don't have the raging, throbbing hate boner for Illumination that a lot of other animation fans seem to have, and that's because I find these movies to be harmless. In fact, I'm not ashamed to say that I think Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2 are both good movies that I've rewatched several times. And I even unironically like certain aspects of the Lorax. Like, come on. Let's not pretend that How Bad Can I Be isn't a banger. Everything else just kinda exists. The majority of Illumination's movies are the cinematic equivalent of plain Cheerios. Just the most inoffensive, unremarkable, middle-of-the-road, instantly forgettable piles of whateverness that I've ever seen. If you ask me, the only genuinely terrible thing they've made is Hop, and that's the one movie from them that literally nobody remembers. But I've seen people, YouTubers in particular, spew such intense vitriol towards the likes of Minions and Sing and Secret Life of Pets and so on. And I'm sorry, but I just don't get it. I can understand wanting to pick apart movies like Norm of the North or The Emoji Movie because of how aggressively shitty they are, but The Grinch? Despicable Me 3? I'm sorry, but I just can't bring myself to get angry at these movies because there's so little substance here to get angry at. And if Illumination is causing any kind of irreparable, catastrophic damage to the animation industry, I ain't seen it, at least not so far. The studio first hit the scene at the very start of the 2010s, and that decade contains some of the most creative, beautiful, and visually diverse animated movies that I've ever seen. Sure, there was still a fair amount of stinkers, but that's going to be the case no matter which decade you look at. Even the so-called Golden Age. And for those who argue that the juvenile nature of Illumination's movies is hurting the industry's reputation by making people think that animation is only for kids, I hate to break it to you, but people have been thinking this long before this studio came along. Sure, they might not be helping, But let's not pretend that Illumination invented fart jokes and pop culture references and that general style of humor you see in certain kids' movies.
Gee, I always thought they were balls of gas burning billions of miles away.
Pumbaa, with you, everything's gas.
If anything, you could blame DreamWorks for that. And at the end of the day, the movies they make, well, they are kids' movies. They clearly aren't meant for me, and that's okay. And yes, I know, a good kids' movie can ideally be enjoyed by people of all ages, but expecting that to be the case all the time just isn't realistic. Sometimes a kids' movie is just going to be a kids' movie, and as long as we continue to get those more ambitious, artistically driven animated films, I personally am fine with that. But with all that said, out of all the studios Nintendo could have partnered with for the Mario movie, Illumination was still nowhere near my first choice. I can understand why they went with a studio owned by Universal since they're already working with them on Super Nintendo World, but that makes it even more frustrating when DreamWorks was right there. And it also didn't help that years went by without any information on this movie whatsoever. Not a release date, not a logo, not even a title. And then last year, out of absolutely nowhere, Nintendo proceeded to light the internet on fire with the cast reveal.
You serious?
Only to once again go silent for another whole year, giving us no updates on the movie other than delaying it. The amount of time the Mario movie spent shrouded in mystery allowed people to cement in their minds the idea that it had absolutely no chance of being good. In fact, some people seem to be rooting for this thing to fail, out of hopes that it would be such a dumpster fire that we would spend the next 20 years laughing at it, just like the original Mario movie. Now, I was never expecting that because Illumination really doesn't make dumpster fires, but I still couldn't deny that all signs seem to point towards this project being a dud. A movie based on a franchise known for being light on story, produced by a studio with a mostly mediocre output, directed by the creators of a show that most people don't like, and starring a grab bag of actors who were likely cast for their names first and their talent second. And when we finally got confirmation of a new trailer in October, I was hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. But then, something strange happened. The day before the trailer dropped, we got a teaser poster. And the tragic de-thickification of Mario aside, it actually looked good? No, not just good, but actually kind of amazing?
Oh my god!
I mean, for reference, look at the first posters for a bunch of other Illumination movies. They're typically as bare minimum as you can get. Nothing but a character standing at a blank void, usually with a corny tagline attached. This is not that. This poster evokes a sense of scale, a sense of wonder, and it's lavish with detail. And I'm not just talking about surface level stuff like mushrooms, coins, and question blocks that just about anyone can recognize. Off in the distance, you can spot a cannon that looks like it was ripped straight out of Super Mario 64, and one of the bell-shaped trees from 3D World. Towards the foreground, you can see a stand selling the same fruits from Yoshi's Story, and the turnips from Super Mario Bros. 2. Even Toad's backpack, which is very reminiscent of the one Captain Toad wears, is decorated with buttons representing Fossil Falls and Toast Arena from Mario Odyssey. These are not things somebody is going to notice unless they have some level of deeper knowledge of the franchise. And while it might seem silly to let a poster influence my excitement for a movie by this much, what this seemed to indicate is that maybe, just maybe, this is something that Illumination is actually putting effort into, and that Nintendo is fully committed to making sure this new Mario movie is everything the old one wasn't. And when that first trailer finally dropped, I was quite frankly blown away. Like, it took a few viewings for it to really sink in. I just watched a trailer for Illumination's Mario movie, and it was awesome! I thought about putting a quick video to talk off the cuff about my impressions, but I just had so many thoughts that I needed to make this into a proper video essay. God, where do I begin with this trailer? Okay, let's just start simple and look at the animation. This movie is fucking gorgeous! Now, that's not to say that Illumination's previous movies have been ugly. They're bright, they're colorful, they're pleasing to the eye, but you can tell that they were made on a budget. This does not seem to be the case here. While you can still see traces of Illumination's usual style here, particularly in some of their character designs, this is mostly a pretty radical departure from the super simplistic, plasticky art direction we've come to expect from this studio. If I didn't know any better and you told me this was being made by Disney, I might just have believed you. Everything just looks so lush and alive, and that first trailer alone is filled with so many little touches that make it feel like the animators were finally given a proper budget to work with. From the individual snowflakes getting caught in Bowser's hair, to the refraction effect caused by the falling lava, to characters' breath being visible whenever they speak, to the decorative engravings on the Penguin King's crown. And speaking of which, let's talk about the penguins, because there are a number of reasons for why their inclusion in that first trailer got me so excited. So, when you think of the most iconic, most easily recognizable species in the Mario universe, you probably think of Toads, Goombas, Koopas, Yoshis, Boos, etc. But penguins? Chances are they're not going to be the first ones to come to mind. Maybe they're not super obscure, but still, if you show somebody who doesn't follow video games a picture of a Goomba, they'll probably know what it is, or at least where it comes from. But if you show them one of these guys, I doubt they're going to be like, oh, yes, that's one of the penguins who made their first appearance in the Super Mario 64 level Cool Cool Mountain, and would go on to make cameos as background characters in a number of spin-offs in the occasional mainline game. Basically, that was a very long-winded way to make this point. The inclusion of characters like these penguins indicated that this was not going to be a stale, ultra-safe adaptation that only pulled from the most surface-level elements of the Mario world. In other words, this was not going to be New Super Mario Bros. The movie. And that's been made even more clear by every subsequent trailer, clip, and piece of promotional material we've gotten. I'm not going to go over every single Easter egg and reference because there's a million videos that have done that already, but to single out a few notably deep cuts, that Bowser standee Mario punches is based on his artwork from Bowser's Inside Story, Peach has her biker outfit from Mario Kart Wii, that commercial uses the Super Mario Bros. Super Show theme song, and Swanky Kong? Are you kidding me? I've never even heard of that guy until now. And not only is this movie bringing together elements from all corners of the Mario universe, but it's also taking creative liberties with some of those elements. The icy kingdom that the penguins live in is a brand new set piece that we've never seen in the games. And then we have this character, who appears to be the leader of Bowser's army. And the fact that his design is based on the spiny shell from Mario Kart is just genius. Now, something else I want to talk about is the general tone of this movie that the trailers have conveyed. I'm not going to go as far as saying that this movie is taking itself seriously, because I don't think anybody wants to see a serious Mario movie. But it hasn't just been non-stop goofiness either. And when it comes to Illumination, that's practically unheard of. The first trailer had like 2 jokes, both of which were actually pretty funny.
Do you yield?
And even though the second one was definitely more jokey, there was still a clear sense of stakes, of scale, of adventure. We all originally assumed the plot was just going to be Bowser kidnaps Peach, Mario saves Peach, the end. But instead, Bowser's being presented as an actual genuine threat, who isn't just kidnapping somebody, but waging an all-out war against the Mushroom Kingdom in every neighboring area. And boy am I glad that this movie seems to finally be putting an end to the Miyamoto hates stories narrative that was never true to begin with. Yes, Miyamoto has indicated that when it comes to a series like Mario, storytelling is not all that essential. A strong story can definitely enhance the experience, but a Mario game can still be great without one. But Miyamoto was clearly smart enough to understand that he could never apply this philosophy to a movie because without a story, there is no movie. And finally, let's talk about the most contentious aspect of this movie, being the voice cast. Look, celebrity voice casts in mainstream animated movies are nothing new. And even though we've seen plenty of times that a great screen actor can also be a great voice actor, I still agree that dedicated voice actors get shafted far too often. But to Illumination's credit, they haven't been shoving the actors' names in our faces in the marketing like so many other movies do. And if they had to use big names, I think they managed to pick actors who feel like good enough fits for their characters. Yes, even Chris Pratt, I will get to that later. Let's start with Jack Black as Bowser, which I was completely on board with from the beginning. I've always been of the opinion that Bowser is at his best when he's funny, and while I'm sure he'll still have plenty of comedic moments, Jack Black went the extra mile to give Bowser a voice that makes him actually kind of intimidating.
Open the gates!
Whoa!
which I did not expect. And then we've got Keegan-Michael Key, who's practically unrecognizable as Toad. The voice he's doing is essentially a softer, less screechy version of how Toad sounds in the games, which makes perfect sense because I don't think we need 90 minutes of Charlie Day is known for playing anxious, jittery characters, so even though he is just using his normal voice here, it feels like a perfect fit for Luigi. Like, the second I heard that scream, I was sold. Anya Taylor-Joy seemed to be the one casting that nobody had any real problem with, probably because people just aren't nearly as attached to Peach's voice as they are to Mario's. And even if it's not to the extent of Jack Black or Keegan-Michael Key's performances, she does seem to be putting an effort to sound at least a bit different from her natural speaking voice. Seth Rogen sure does sound like Seth Rogen, laugh and all, but I happen to find him funny, so I don't mind. Plus, he name-dropped the Play Choice 10 during that Nintendo Direct, so you know he's a genuine fan. And then we have Chris Pratt. Oh, Chris Pratt. Look, at the end of the day, people were always going to be mad about anybody other than Charles Martinet being cast. Now, personally, I've enjoyed Chris Pratt in pretty much everything I've seen him in. I find the controversy surrounding him to be largely manufactured, and when it comes to his casting as Mario, I really think you could do worse. I mean, if you look at a lot of his other roles, from Star-Lord to Emmett to Andy from Parks and Rec, he typically plays characters who are very goofy and jovial and optimistic. So having him play a character like Mario really doesn't feel that off-brand for him. I'm just saying that it doesn't feel like they decided to just literally pick a random popular leading man like The Rock or Tom Holland, who wouldn't have made even a lick of sense.
Illogical! Illogical! Illogical!
And as for the performance itself, I'm sorry, but I think he sounds fine. Even if it is pretty much just Chris Pratt's normal voice with maybe a hint of a Brooklyn accent, it's not gonna come anywhere close to hampering my enjoyment of this film when literally everything else about it looks this phenomenal. And it is also worth mentioning that even though the main cast consists of celebrities, there actually are a number of legit career voice actors here in supporting roles, which is really cool to see because most animated movies don't even do that. So to wrap things up here, I really do think the Super Mario Bros. Movie has the potential to be for Illumination what the Peanuts movie was for Blue Sky and what Spider-Verse was for Sony. A beautiful, faithful, lovingly crafted adaptation of a beloved property brought to us by a studio that people expected very little from. Originally, everybody assumed that Illumination was going to drag the Mario IP down to their usual brand of mediocrity. But instead, just the opposite happened. Nintendo was bringing Illumination up to the standard of quality that we've come to expect from them, and as a result, is unlocking the potential that I always suspected that this studio had. Movies and shows based on video games have only been getting better over the past few years, and this might just give Last of Us a run for its money as the best one yet. Unless Yoshi ends up having no lines, in which case it's an instant 0 out of 10.